It's with great pleasure that I welcome back Dr. Sean Patel, who's the CEO and founder of Prep Expert, the title sponsor of the College Admissions Process podcast. Sean, you have a special message for the listeners?
Hey, John, I just wanted to mention for all the parents and students who are listening to this great podcast, we have a really special offer only for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast for Prep Expert. So, if your student is going to be taking an online SAT, ACT, PSAT course anytime soon, or is looking for one-on-one tutoring with top 1% tutors, head over to prepexpert.com. We offer live online courses for every college admissions exam. On top of that, we have the best score guarantees, best curriculum, and best instructors in the test prep industry. And just for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast, you can get 20% off any online SAT or PSAT or ACT course, as well as one-on-one tutoring. So you can get 20% off. Just make sure you use the promo code College Talk. That's one word, College Talk, and you'll get 20% off just for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast. And I hope you guys can use that to your advantage, save a bunch of money at prepexpert.com.
Thank you so much, Sean. And to everyone out there, once again, that promo code is College Talk. That's one word, College Talk. Thank you all, and best wishes.
Welcome to The Cap, where we are here to speak with college reps and other professionals in the field of college admissions to help answer all your questions and guide you through every step of the process. So if you're serious about college admissions, you've come to the right place. Are you ready? Let's talk about it. And now, here's your host, Dr. John Durante.
Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce you today Palma Muntz, who's a senior regional admissions counselor at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Now, I am so excited because this is the first time I have a university from the great state of Alaska. Palma, thank you so much for being here with me today. How are you?
I'm great. It's fun to be here with you, John. I've listened to the podcast a lot, and so it's kind of cool to be here myself.
Well, thank you so much, Palmer, for all of the support, and it's so great to have you here today. So let's get right to it, Palmer. What type of student truly thrives at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and are there qualities academically or personally that tend to align with the university's environment and campus culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll say this, I think as we talk today, I think I'm going to be talking from the perspective of students who are coming from outside of Alaska, because I think sometimes they approach, this differently. So if you were a high school student who came up to me at a college fair, a lot of times the first question I would ask you is, are you a little adventurous? Are you up for doing something kind of crazy? And a lot of times, obviously the fact that they've approached University of Alaska Fairbanks often is part of the answer to that question. But a lot of times, students who are looking at UAF are ones who have that little bit of adventure. They're willing to try new things. And I tell students, you don't have to be like a crazy outdoorsman at all to come to UAF. But if you're willing to try a few new things, the one thing I can pretty much guarantee is you'll get to see and do and experience things you won't get to do anywhere else. And so that's maybe the first component. Something else that I'm sure will come up a little bit as we talk is also being comfortable with the idea of traveling a distance, because most students are going to be, coming 2,500 to 3,000 to 5,000 miles to come to UF. And we have students from Florida and Texas and Southern California who come to UAF. And so not everyone is comfortable with that. I'm transparent with students. I tell them I would never have gone to the University of Alaska Fairbanks. I went 10 minutes away for college. So I think that little bit of independence is good. And then one of the other things that I like to bring up, because you don't see it in a brochure or whatever, is a cool aspect of the culture at UAF. The way I describe it is it's very much a you do you culture. Whoever you are, whatever your background is, whatever your goals, your interests, it's all good. You like to hunt, I'm a vegan, we can still be friends. And I think that's pretty special. And I don't want to paint too pretty a picture. It's not perfect, no place is, but that's pretty neat. It's big nerd culture. If you like playing board games and role-playing games, you're going to find your people. Of course, a great outdoors culture because it's freaking Alaska. And so, if you like being outdoors, there's so much to do. Very LGBTQ friendly, very military friendly. So that's often the students that I'm talking to fall into those categories of being a little adventurous, being their own person, being, just good people.
Well, that's awesome. I love how you describe it as an all-inclusive environment with students that are adventurous and not afraid to travel, right? Because Alaska is a little bit of a hike, and I appreciate that overview. But can you give us even more of an overview of UAF in terms of majors and programs, new developments, or anything else you want prospective students and their families to know about?
Yeah, I could talk about this all day, obviously. Um, So, University of Alaska Fairbanks is the flagship university for the state of Alaska. And maybe just as a little sidebar, Alaska is the largest state geographically. In fact, my favorite piece of trivia about Alaska is that if you took the state of Alaska and dropped it on top of the mainland United States, it would stretch from Jacksonville, Florida to San Francisco. Got all those islands that run all the way to Russia. And yet there's only 4 universities in the state and then a handful of colleges. So there's Alaska Pacific University, a private university in Anchorage, and then 3 public universities. The University of Alaska system, all 3 operate under one president and one board of regents, but each has its own personality and strengths. You have the University of Alaska Southeast in Juneau, University of Alaska Anchorage, and then University of Alaska Fairbanks. We're the flagship university. I think we're regarded as the research university. But interestingly, we're the smallest flagship university in the country. We only have a little over 7,000 students. Our student to faculty ratio is 11 to 1. 3/4 of our classes have less than 20 students. And yet we're a very significant research university. I believe we get $250 million a year in research grant funding. So my sales pitch to students is, if you want something that's going to be a little more personal, you can raise your hand in class, you can get involved, and yet you have the resources of a major research university, UAF is a great place. A lot of students from the lower 48, or the outside, as Alaskans call it, will come up for our STEM majors. And some of them seem really obvious, like wildlife biology and geosciences and so on. Strong engineering programs, aerospace engineering, mechanical engineering, some unusual ones like mining engineering. Okay. And so a lot of students will come up for the natural sciences and for engineering, but we have a broad range of programs. Fantastic anthropology major, political science, great business programs, art, really nice art majors. So again, for the student who's maybe adventurous, but not necessarily sciencey, there's still opportunities. But then here's one of the most unusual things. We actually have a community college within the university. So we literally offer everything from, for instance, a 1-year program in diesel mechanics. We have culinary arts, we have fire science, all the way through a PhD in space physics. So we can meet students almost wherever they're at.
Well, thank you so much for that overview, Palmer. And how would you describe, and you've said so much already, but how would you describe UAF's mission, philosophy, and core values, especially around access, which you mentioned, innovation, research, and preparing students for a rapidly changing world?
Yeah, thanks. I'd say, first of all, I think UAF puts a really high value on access and on inclusion. Most of our students come from Alaska. We focus on that quite a bit. And many of our students come from rural Alaska. And I always like to kind of point out that rural Alaska is its own beast. Many of our students come from villages with 3, 4, 500 residents. They may have graduated in a senior class with 2 or 3 other students, and then transitioning into university life is a big step. So for instance, we have on campus a department called Rural Student Services dedicated to helping them with the transition, with being successful, with a special focus on students who are Alaska Native. About 20% of our student body is Alaska Native or Native American. So those Indigenous perspectives and knowledge and history color a lot of what we do. So very important part of what we do. And then our location in the Arctic is a big difference maker. And so, like, for instance, when you talk about innovation and you talk about research, we emphasize that, for instance, in our, let's say our engineering programs, we'll cover the same territory that would be covered at any other good ABET accredited engineering program, but with the added layer of what does it mean to do this in an extreme environment? So students are equipped to work in all kinds of settings and to problem solve. And for instance, we're working on projects right now around, and I'm going to say this wrong because I'm not a science person, but for instance, we're designing 3D houses, 3D printed houses out of concrete. And I'm sure I just botched that, and some professor is just ready to kill me now. But you can kind of get the visual on that. And so there are things that we're able to do in Alaska that nowhere else in the United States can be done. We have, I believe, the only university-owned rocket range in the world. And we send up launches. We just did one last week, I think, to do research in the atmosphere, looking at atmospheric changes in the aurora borealis and so on, where our position at the far north really gives us opportunities that wouldn't be available elsewhere.
Well, based on everything that you described, there's definitely so much available at UAF that frankly is not available elsewhere because of your amazing environment and frankly, your awesome school community. What unique academic programs or hands-on learning experience truly set UAF apart? And I know that you touched upon a lot already, but what else would you share?
Oh, man. Here's, you know, something I would say is, I think I mentioned earlier, maybe I didn't, that we bring in, I think it's $250 million a year in research grant funding. We only have about 7,400 students. And I believe right now, only about a little over 1,000 of those are graduate students. So what I'm saying is, we need undergraduates to help us in fulfilling those responsibilities. And I think then the opportunities that arise for students are more readily available. And then one other thing that I like students to hear about, especially highly motivated students, is, for instance, we have a program we call it URSA, Undergraduate Research and Scholarly Activity. Many of our majors will have research built into them, but URSA is where students, undergraduates, can write their own research grant proposal to study whatever they're interested in and then get funded to do that independent research, up to $3,000 for a semester. During the summer, it can be up to $6,000. They can also apply for funding for creative projects, for travel grants, and so on. And so, I talk with students and I say, one of my little imaginations for you is that you come through and you do our pre-professional health track and you do a biology major. You'll do research as part of that biology. When you go to apply to med school, you'll be able to show, hey, I've done research. And I also, maybe through URSA, I've done independent funded research as well. Oh, and by the way, I was in Fairbanks, Alaska, which makes you a more interesting person right there. And I think it gives you a leg up.
Well, yeah, it definitely gives you a leg up if you're able to do not only research, but independent funded research, which really is unique. Now, for students coming from the lower 48, what are some misconceptions they might have, Palmer, about studying in Alaska, and how does UAF help them acclimate and thrive?
Yeah, when I started at University of Alaska Fairbanks about 8 years ago, and by the way, I'm based in Washington State. I'm a regional admissions counselor, so I serve the Pacific Northwest, primarily traveling all around there. And I also serve the students in sort of the northeastern quadrant of the United States. So I'm not from Alaska. And one of the things that I expected to be a big challenge was the cold temperatures. And uh, and for instance, first of all, I'll say that hasn't been the challenge I thought it would be. Okay. But when I meet students, often one of the first questions I'll say is, how do you feel about cold weather? And then, someone says, I've been surprised how many students will say, oh, I like the cold. And I'm like, okay, let's test that. And so I'll say, here's the test. If you come to UAF, you'll get to join the 40 below club. And they'll be like, well, what's that? The first time or any time that it gets to 40 degrees below zero, we have a tradition that you go and take your picture with the temperature sign on campus. You grab your friends, go take your picture with the temperature sign on campus in your swimsuits. Are you up for that? And then you watch their faces, and there's a dozen kids talking to you, and half of them are like, that's awesome. And 3 or 4 of them are like, I would never do that. Okay, don't come to UAF. And then, of course, I always emphasize, it doesn't get to 40 below very often, but it is cold. I sometimes joke around and say, it's cold enough to kill you, but it's not a miserable cold. Funny as it sounds, it's a dry cold. It's not usually very windy. I've lived in the Midwest. I'll say that in many ways, Fairbanks is easier to deal with than Chicago or Central Illinois and so on. And then I talk about, also in the summer, the temperatures will be in the 70s and 80s. You get a wide range. So obviously, weather is something to take into account. I think a bigger challenge might be the short days in the middle of the winter. In December, the sun may only be up for 3 or 4 hours a day. And there is such a thing as seasonal affective disorder, and we know that that's a real thing. We have a counseling and health center on campus. We offer free counseling appointments. We can help students with whether it's homesickness or getting used to the environment or whatever. We'll suggest that they get happy lamps so that they can turn those on in the morning and get their vitamin D or whatever they need, and encourage people to get outside when the sun is out. So there are adjustments to be made, but I think, for going back to the very first thing we said, for the student who's a little bit adventurous, they'll be fine. And we try and keep things active on campus. Active might be different things to different people. It might be going out. We have over 20 miles of cross-country trails on campus. So it might be going out mountain biking, cross-country skiing. It might be sitting with your friends in the corner, knitting or beading or whatever is artistic for you, or just reading. Everyone's got their own ways of dealing with it.
Hey, podcast friends, if you've been enjoying the College Admissions Process podcast, I'm excited to share my new book, Straight from the Admissions Office, Insider Strategies for College Applications. It's packed with insights and tips from over 250 podcast episodes with admissions professionals, designed to make the college process less overwhelming. Whether you're a student, parent, or college counselor, it's a valuable resource for navigating the admissions process. By grabbing a copy, you're also helping to support the podcast. The links are in the show notes. Thank you, and best wishes to all with the college admissions process.
Well, it definitely points to the fact that it might not be the right fit for everyone, but there's a lot of students I know who are listening to this saying, sign me up. That's what I want to do. I want to be in the below 40 club, and I don't mind the short days and all of that. But again, like any other college or university, it's not necessarily the right fit for everyone. So, Palmer, we really appreciate that overview. And the thing that students and families and even the college counselors that listen to the podcast, what they want to hear about is the application review. So, can you walk us through UAF's holistic application review process and what are the key components you look for in an applicant?
I love this question. We don't do holistic review. Okay. Our admission process, I often say, is very straightforward, very streamlined. And I would say we look at three things. What degree, what major are you interested in? What are you applying for? What classes have you taken? And what grades did you get? We are test free. We don't use SAT or ACT tests at all in our admission decisions. We don't use the essays if a student applies on Common App. That's not part of our review process. And going back to what I said earlier about the fact that we have our community and technical college. So what that means is I always have a pathway to admission for a student. Let's say a student is interested in something in our College of Fisheries and Ocean Sciences, but maybe they have not taken pre-calculus or trig. That we don't have to say no to them. We can possibly admit them as what we call exploratory studies or an undeclared major, or we could admit them to an associate's degree program. And when they're ready, then they can transition into that fisheries and marine sciences major that they want. So I love talking with students and sharing that with them. And sometimes I can ask them 2 or 3, 4 questions and say, hey, let me take the drama out of your life. Based on what you told me, you will be offered admission, and to just see the weight kind of go off of their shoulders when they realize that this is an opportunity they have. They don't have to sit on pins and needles, but they have the opportunity to instead consider, is this the right place for me? Rather than, is this a place that will give me a chance? Makes my job a lot easier, needless to say. It's one of my favorite things really about being an admissions counselor for UAF.
Well, that's terrific. I love how you broke it down. It is not a holistic review. You're basically looking at three things. What major do you want, students, or your course of study? What classes have you taken while in high school? Your grades received, but you're not looking at essays. You're not looking at test scores. And I really appreciate that you said there's always a pathway for a student who wants to be admitted. Now, many applications offer additional information sections. So, Palmer, how have students used that space effectively to provide important context or additional information?
I would say this, again, in terms of making our admission decision, those really do not factor in. But what I like to do, and I think some of my colleagues in the admissions office do this as well, is let's say that we receive a Common App from a student. I'll read their essay, and what I'm looking for is what are the things that maybe are important to that student that we can reinforce and help them build on at UAF? What are the activities that they've been a part of? An example, John, was just a few days ago, I read an essay from a student who wanted to do one of our engineering majors, but mentioned that they were heavily involved with music. So I followed up with them to see, is music something you want to have as part of your university experience? Because at UAF, we have a symphony orchestra. We have a number of different ensembles. We can look at whether it's possible for you to plug into one of those, because music might be what helps you stay healthy and you don't need to give that up. So that's how those supplemental pieces factor in, helping us help the student evaluate UAF.
Well, I love that holistic approach to the student, if you will, right? You're looking for ways where you can help the student with whatever it is that they're going to need in terms of their supports. And coincidentally, I was going to ask for students who had an IEP or a 504 plan or other learning considerations while in high school, What resources are available at UAF, and how, if at all, do these factors enter into the admissions review?
They don't factor into the admission review, at least in any conscious way at all. We offer a wide variety of support services, just like most universities do. In light of the specific question you asked, I would highlight our Disability Support Services office. I think things just generally have changed in the last 10 to 20 years. I remember, earlier in my career, sometimes feeling like students had to really prove that they qualified for these support services. And now I know at UAF, but I've seen it with other schools as well. I think there's a much more open-handed and respectful approach. I love our disability support services staff. They'll sit down with you. I've been through this myself. I've observed these meetings, and it's really a question of, what do you need to be successful? How can we support you in this? And the student still needs to self-advocate. They're adults and so on, but they've got backing. And I feel very positive about UAF in that regard. But also with my limited experience, I also feel good about how a lot of other colleges and universities are dealing with this.
Well, we really appreciate that, Palmer. And another thing that comes to mind in terms of what parents, students, what they're thinking about is cost of attendance. So what could you tell me about your cost of attendance, grants, scholarships, or anything else related to UAF?
I think UAF's a great value. Of course, I get paid to say that, right? Um, well, our cost this year for non-resident students, tuition, fees, housing, and a meal plan is about $42,000. So we're one of the more inexpensive flagship universities in the country. And then in addition to that, we have an academic scholarship program. We call it the Nanook Pledge, which is awarded automatically upon admission based on the student's GPA. And so that can be as much as $12,000 a year, for instance, for 4 years. So $48,000 a year over 4 years for a student with a 3.8 GPA. Okay. In addition to that, I think a really important factor for people to understand is in Alaska, you can also qualify for in-state tuition in as little as 12 months. So with a little bit of careful planning, and the admissions staff can kind of talk you through this, you could, after your first year, see your cost for tuition, fees, housing, and a meal plan drop to in the neighborhood of $24,000 a year before financial aid. So that's one factor. A couple other things that I like to mention is if you happen to come from a military family, students who are the dependent of a veteran or active duty service member are eligible for in-state tuition. And also, all of our e-campus classes, all of our online courses are charged at in-state tuition. And we offer a number of different programs entirely online. Let me shift gears a little bit too. We're also part of a program called the Western Undergraduate Exchange. We all just call it WUI because that's way too many syllables to say Western Undergraduate Exchange. This is a program that is offered by about 160 public universities in the Western United States. And so, where a student typically, when they leave their home state to go to another state, would have to pay out-of-state tuition, if you go to a school that participates in WUI and they award you WUI, you don't pay out-of-state tuition. Instead, you pay about 1.5 times in-state tuition as a rule. So it will usually save you $10,000 to $15,000 or more per year. Each university has its own rules and its own policies for how they award WUI. Some schools will give it based on academic record. It's like an academic scholarship. Others may limit it to certain majors, whatever. So as students in the Western United States explore their options, when they hear that a school participates in WUI, I say, ask that school, how do I get it? Okay. Now at UAF, here's how you get it. You ask for it. Anyone who's a resident of one of the participating states is eligible for WUI. And those students this year, their cost for tuition, fees, housing, and meal plan is around $29,000 a year. It depends on their course load and their major sometimes. And in addition to that, they can receive academic scholarships of up to $8,000 a year.
Well, that's a great overview. And again, something that's very important to students and their families as they plan for the college process. I always put the Office of Undergraduate Admissions in the show notes, Palmer. If there are any links in terms of everything that you described with financial aid, please send them to me. And of course, we'll make it available to everyone listening in the show notes. Now, this has been a terrific conversation. I always like to ask, though, before we get to the end, is there a question I didn't ask or a topic that simply didn't come up about UAF or frankly anything else related to the college admissions process that you'd like to share with us now?
Yeah, thanks. Well, one thing that I just realized that I didn't bring up earlier, many students today have a lot of concerns about climate change and environmental issues and so on. And that's a place where UAF has a pretty distinctive advantage over most places. In Alaska, we're seeing these things in real time. Literally, for instance, having to have villages moved away from the water because of rising sea levels. And without going into a great deal of detail, I'll just say, for instance, we have 3 different majors dealing specifically with climate change, climate science, everything from sort of an environmental studies, a political science approach to hardcore meteorology and weather forecasting and climate change. We have other majors dealing with conservation and the environment. So anyone who's got that as a passion or as a concern should be looking at UAF. And I also like to mention we have a really nice honors college. It's not snobbish or elite or anything. That's just not our culture, our personality. And there's no extra charge for being involved with it. So we have an honors college with some nice programming, some nice advantages to it. And there's an optional track within the honors college called the Climate Scholars Program, where students can look at climate change through the lens of whatever their major is. And there's, for instance, we'll do things we call climate intensives. One example of this is students can take a float down the Yukon River and stop at different villages along the way to learn about their sustainability practices. Or we do something called the climate exchange, where you could, for instance, go to New Zealand and study climate change in the Antarctic as well as in the Arctic with us. And so I just want to highlight that for students who have a heart for the environment, who are concerned about the future of climate and what's happening, UAF is probably someplace that should be on their list.
Well, I think that's tremendous advice. And again, this has been a terrific conversation. I'm so grateful that I had you here, Palmer. Unfortunately, it does lead us to that last question, which is, what are your top 3 pieces of advice? And you've given so much, but what are your top 3 for students and parents getting ready for the college admissions process?
I come to this with a little different perspective maybe than some. I think one thing is I would encourage students that they control more than they realize. I think because of the media, we can tend to overfocus on that little handful of schools that are sometimes called the highly rejectives, when in fact, most students have multiple options. Don't be discouraged by that. If you're a 3.0 student who's taken a college prep curriculum, just a standard curriculum, you have a wide variety of options available. Another thing I would say is, even though you have all of those options available to you, make sure you have at least one choice that you feel confident in, you feel comfortable with, that's close to home, and that you know you can afford. because even when everything is going smooth, you're a brilliant student with offers from a variety of schools, and mommy and daddy are ready with their checkbook to support you and everything. You never know when, right towards the end, something takes a left-hand turn, and you don't want to be scrambling. So make sure you have something local, again, something that will meet your needs, that you feel comfortable with and confident in, but that you know you can afford, because sometimes life gets in the way. And then related to that, I would say choosing a college is a really big decision. It's potentially a life-changing decision, but it's not life and death. Most students attend more than one college before they graduate. It's not a mark of shame to transfer. There's no scarlet T that you have to wear. And so make your best choice, do your investigation, but it's okay. You'll recover if somehow you didn't, because you don't know if you made the right choice until it's too late. Okay? So don't treat this like a life and death decision when it's just a really important one.
Such great advice. It's definitely an important decision, but there's over 4,000 colleges and universities out there, students. So try to enjoy it. Try to embrace it with your family, to try to be reflective and find the right fit for you. Take your time to visit, join the virtual events, review everything on the websites, meet reps at college fairs, at your high school, on campus if you're fortunate enough, and make the best decision for you. Enjoy it. And like Palmer said, in case it doesn't fit, yes, you can absolutely transfer. Actually, it's something that I did after my first year of college, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Palmer, you're awesome. This conversation was terrific. I'm so grateful that you gave of your time and your expertise today. Can't wait to have you again in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. It was really fun talking with you.
Pleasure was all ours. And one last thing to say to everyone out there, good luck with the college search. Take care all, and best wishes.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of The CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The CAP.
Thank you for listening to the College Admissions Process Podcast presented by Prep Expert. Prep Expert offers live online SAT and ACT courses with the best score guarantees, instructors, and curriculum. Go to prepexpert.com to guarantee your child's success.